In today's episode, I will be giving my picks and analysis for UFC 302 this Saturday on June 1st. So let's get right into it. Do something, man. People are questioning you. Shut up. Shut up. Okay, yep, do that. Sure, guys. Stupid and dumb. Just an idiot. Get your shit together, son. Fuck it. I loved it. Welcome to the Dub Cast. Here we are again, the second UFC broadcast on the Dubcast. Actually had a guest in store for you guys, but they backed out, so you know who you are. Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about UFC 301. If you want to hear my thoughts on UFC 301, I already had a podcast predicting everything that happened, a podcast after the fact mixed in with a bunch of other sports stuff. So I won't go into really anything that happened in UFC 301. All that matters is I came out of that 1-3. I failed the Dubcast audience, so I'm here to claim redemption. I'm going to go through each of these 12 fights for you guys that are happening on Saturday, and I'll give you 2 parlays and 3 straight bets. So at the end of it, so stick along for the whole ride. If you want to hear about every fight, the background, I kind of go into each of the fights, the odds, what I'm seeing, what I like, what I don't like. So with that being said, let's jump right into our early prelims. So the first fight is a flyweight fight between Mitch Raposo and Andre Lima. Mitch Raposo is plus 220 on the money line, and Andre Lima is minus 270. So Mitch Raposo, he only has one loss in his career. This is his first kind of real fight in the UFC. His only loss in his career comes from the Dana White Contender Series. So that's something to keep a note on, that his only loss is from an actual UFC sort of fight. His last 3 wins, which he's won 3 in a row, are all via knockout. So Andre Lima, he's the heavy favorite in this. He is undefeated with an 8-0 record. His only win in the UFC is via a disqualification by the other side, so something to keep a note there. Through his 8 wins, besides the DQ, he's got 5 knockouts Well, I wrote 5 knockouts and 2 knockouts make up other fights, so probably one of those is decisions. Definitely 5 knockouts, 2 decisions. So, as per usual, these early prelims are kind of really, you're just picking at straws here if you're betting on these, man. Call the number if you're betting the early prelims, even though I'm going to give you a pick on the next fight. But my analysis here is I don't love either side. Lima is undefeated, but he comes with minus 300. For those odds, I'm not really in love with it. If I had to pick, I would pick Lima, but I'm not going to be betting on this fight. And as terms of going the distance, I think it ends early. I just think one of them will get knocked out. It'll be fast. Just early prelim, usually fights end quickly. So that's my picks analysis for that fight. Moving on to the second fight, it is a women's bantamweight fight between Eileen Perez and Jocelyn Edwards. So Eileen Perez is minus 195 on the money line, and Jocelyn Edwards is plus 165. So Eileen Perez, she's 2-1 in the UFC. She only has 2 losses overall in her career, and both of her wins are via decision. So Jocelyn Edwards is 4-3 in the UFC in comparison. All of her fights end in decisions, and one half of her decision wins actually come via split decision. So she's shaky at best. So here's my first 2 picks of my betting card. One of them will go into parlay, or actually both of these will go into parlay. So I solidly like Eileen Perez here, minus 195. I don't think that's too high of odds, especially since I'm putting that one in a parlay. So that's going to make up our first parlay, part of our first parlay, and then the second part, I'm also going to take this fight to go to the distance. A wise man once told me, just take every woman's fight to go the distance and you'll be in the money. In UFC 301, I told you guys that. Didn't put it on my official betting card, but that was literally the only bet I won at UFC 301. So this fight to go the distance and Perez in the fight. So I'll keep those in mind, later for when I build the rest of the parlay, rest of those 2 parlays. So moving on to the third fight is a welterweight bout between Mickey Gall and Basil Hafez. So Mickey Gall is plus 315 on the money line, and Basil Hafez is minus 425. So diving into Mickey Gall, he's got a 3-inch height advantage, if that means anything to you. Back in the day when I used to just blindly watch this stuff and not really do research, I would just do it based off reach and height. Word to the wise, it doesn't really matter. But if for some reason you think height matters a lot, then he's got a 3-inch height advantage. So Mickey has a long history in the UFC. I'm gonna call him a punching bag. Sorry, bro, but yeah, they UFC's got to employ guys to get beat up. It's just what it is. It's part of the business. They're earning a check too. They're trying their best, but it seems like Mickey's kind of just there to be beat down. So don't love him. Most of his losses are by decision. There's some knockouts in there mixed in there. So if you're really chasing odds, like you're really looking for like plus 1,000, plus whatever, all of his wins are via submission. So if you for some reason like Mickey in this fight, take him by submission because literally all of his wins are by submission. So moving on to our boy Basil Hafez. His only fight in the UFC was a loss to Jack Della Maddalena via split decision too. So I know Jack Della Maddalena is actually legit. So this is encouraging me about Basil here. He can win in different ways. He gets subs, he gets knockouts, he gets decisions, all that. So I feel like this fight is a setup to boost him in the rankings, move him up on all that stuff, all that rankings, whatever, get him better fights. So my picks for this fight, if you really want to like bet every fight or something, if you really have to throw money on every single fight, then take Hafez. For me, the odds are just really too high to really do anything with it. Even minus 425, like that's not even good on a parlay, really. So I also don't really know how he would win this fight because he can do it in a very different way every time, and I wouldn't be surprised. So personally, I'm staying away from this fight here. So yeah, let's move on. So that was the early prelims. Now let's get to the regular prelims. Our fourth fight is a welterweight fight between Phil Rowe and Jake Matthews. So Phil Rowe is plus 140 on the money line, and Jake Matthews is minus 170. So Phil Rowe, height advantage, 4 inches for my height people out there. All of his wins in the UFC are via knockout, and both of his losses are decisions, and he actually has a loss to Neil Magny, who I know is decent in the UFC. As I'm going to keep studying all these UFC fight cards and stuff for you guys, I'll learn more and more, but just going off what I know from kind of being a fan for about 3 years now, Magny's legit, so that's a legitimate loss. He's the guy he's going against, Jake Matthews, the favorite. He's been around in the UFC for a long time. In my opinion, some of the people he's fought and lost to are not great. So, looking at his last 5 fights, he's 2-3, and there's just a lot of variability in the way those fights have ended for him. So, my picks in this fight, I'm taking Rowe, underdog plus 140. Not loving what I see with Matthews personally. I think he's sort of a punching bag. Sorry, bro, but I'm liking Rowe here. This is an opportunity for him to step up as the underdog, win this fight. I have no idea how long it goes or how it ends. Maybe knockout because Rowe gets knockouts. But we are taking Rowe straight up as a underdog. So add that to the card for later on. Our next fight, we have a lightweight bout between Grant Dawson and Joe Solecki. So Grant Dawson is minus 500 on the money line, and Joe Solecki is plus 350. So about Grant Dawson, he has lots of time in the UFC. So far, beating up people I haven't really heard of. His most recent loss and only UFC loss so far is to Bobby Green, who is a legend. He can do everything. He's on the older side now, but it's a respectable loss. Grant Dawson can get it done in any manner of ways. He's one of these guys who can sub you, knock you out, decision, whatever. So yeah, obviously a massive favorite in this fight. So let's move on to Solecki. He has only lost twice in the UFC, including 2 former dubcasts. The only guy who won for me on the official card, Drakkar Klose. He can pull off some submissions for you, and he beat Jim Miller in 2021, who's like 40 years old. Just a notable name he's won against, but at this point, Jim Miller is very aging. So my picks for this fight, obviously, for me, if you're listening to this podcast, you know that I pretty much, or my gambling advice, I pretty much stay away from these big odds fights, unless I like a prop bet or something. There's just nothing really here for me. The odds are just kind of fucked. If you're like chasing odds, I don't think Selecki is a terrible choice. I mean, we saw last UFC where that guy called the punching bag, probably Anthony Smith, um, got a sub on the other guy. So anything can happen. If you're really chasing odds, like he could be a decent like odds chase, throwing money, just trying to make it big. But I have little confidence in that. So as for the fight, how it ends, how long it goes, I think there's a lot of variability in that. So staying away completely from this one here. So moving on to fight number 6, it is a heavyweight bout between Jailton Almeida and Alexander Romanov. So Jailton Almeida is minus 290 on the money line, and Alexander Romanov is plus 235. So Jailton Almeida, let's get into his profile. So the last three fights for Almeida, I was actually very impressed looking at this and was wondering why this is so low down on the card. He fought against Curtis Blades, which he lost, but Curtis Blades is now fighting Tom Aspinall for the interim heavyweight title, so that's an interesting loss to a very good fighter. He beat Derek Lewis and Rosenstruik, who I know are two pretty strong lightweight or heavyweight contenders. So I think he's fought really good competition. I was actually very impressed looking at his resume, especially recently. So his only loss in the UFC has been to Blades, as I just mentioned, and only one of his wins in the UFC are just overall maybe have been via decision. So that's something to keep an eye on for those of you betting prop bets here. So going to our other competitor in this fight, Alexander Romanov. He has a loss to Volkov, who I know is legit. I know a little bit about this heavyweight division. Nothing really was impressive to me about Romanov's resume besides the loss, which isn't going to carry weight really. A loss. He only has 2 losses overall, and a lot of his wins are submissions. So my picks for this fight, I'm really liking Almeida in this fight. Due to him having fought like really good competition, I think he's really up there in those rankings. I think he needs to win this fight to stay up there. Just having fought Curtis Blades, who could be the interim champion, I think he's going to be hungry. He wants to win this fight. So that being said, he is almost minus 300, so we got to throw him on a parlay. So I don't think this fight goes the distance, and I think Almeida will knock him out, but I'm not betting on that. I'm taking Almeida money line. And so we'll see what parlay I cook up with that later on in the cast here. So moving on to fight number 7, we have a middleweight bout between Cesar Almeida versus Roman Kopylov. Cesar Almeida is minus 120 and Roman Kopylov is plus 100. So Cesar Almeida, he only has 5 fights in his career, and he is 5-0. And his last fight he won in early April of this year. So fighting pretty close to that, about 6 weeks out of that. So it's something to keep an eye on there. With Romani Kopylov, so he actually fought at UFC 298, which was only 3 months ago. He was submitted by Anthony Hernandez. A lot of his wins are via KO in the UFC, and he hasn't really beaten anyone notable that I know of. So for me, this fight is complete coin flip, just don't know what's going to happen. The odds indicate that it's pretty much a pick 'em, which I agree with. I just have no idea. If I had to guess, I think it ends early. I don't think it goes the distance, but once again, this just 2 kind of newer guys here. It's not a lot to go off. So I'm just going to leave this one alone and move on to the next fight. So that being said, we are now moving on to our main card, the last 5 fights, starting at 10 p.m. as usual. So let's get into fight number 8, which is a welterweight bout between Randy Brown and Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. So Randy Brown is minus 180, and Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos is plus 150 on the money lines. So Randy Brown, our favorite, very long career in the UFC. He also lost to Jack Della Maddalena. He also lost to Vicente Luque and Bilal Muhammad. He wins a majority of the fights against people I don't know. Most of his wins are decision wins, and he has a 4-inch height advantage. A lot of big height advantages in this card for some reason. So that is our favorite. Moving on to Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. He's pretty old. He's 37, which I think is pretty old for a fighter. He's also spent a lot of time in the UFC, so that's something to keep a note on. So he actually beat Benoit Saint Denis and Sean Strickland, although that was a long time ago. But Strickland fighting later on in this card, and Benoit is nasty. So actually, two very impressive wins there for him. Usually his wins come via decision, but there are some knockouts in there. So just based off the two fighters, I don't know who's going to win it, but there is something that I like about this. I like this fight to go the distance, so I'm going to throw that with the women's fight to go the distance, and that'll make our first parlay. So both of those fights to go the distance, I like there, and just winner on this one, I don't know. Moving on to our ninth fight, it is a welterweight fight between Nico Price and Alex Morono. They actually fought in 2017, which resulted in a no contest, so here they are again, 7 years later, fighting it out again. So Nico Price is plus 220 and Alex Morono is minus 270. So Nico Price, our underdog, he's also got a long career in the UFC with a lot of noticeable fights. He lost to the aforementioned Vicente Luque, Jeff Neal, Luque again, Phil Rowe, and Robbie Lawler. Sorry. So he beat Randy Brown, who is fighting in the fight before this, I believe. Price has a lot of knockouts and submissions in both wins and losses, and our boy Nico has not fought in nearly a year. I'm not sure if that really affects anything, but if you're looking for reasons to bet against him, there's one. So Morono, Alex Morono, the favorite here. He also has a long UFC career. He's got notable wins over Cowboy Cerrone, Mickey Gall, who's fighting on this card, and he's lost to Chaos Williams and Joaquin Buckley. So Morono, most of his fights end a decision with some knockouts in there. He also fought on that early April card, and he's much more active, having fought a couple times in the past year or so. So just for me, this picks on this fight didn't fall in love with Morono here. I would like him to win by decision, but I'm just going to stay away. I didn't really love any part of this personally. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that one. Moving on to the 10th fight is a middleweight bout between Kevin Holland, who is a minus 290 favorite, and Mikhail, I'm going to butcher this last name, Oleksii Juzkis. Michal Olzikizuks. I don't know, bro. Holland is minus 290, and the other guy is plus 235. So now we're getting into these people that, if you know anything about UFC, you probably know about these guys, especially Kevin Holland. So usually my advice for any betting involving Kevin Holland is to fade him. At UFC 299, faded him against Venom Page. That was free money. Here he's almost minus 300, so something to keep a note on. For those of you who don't know, Kevin Holland usually fights in the stop of a dime. He'll just turn around and fight in like 2 days. So it's really hard to kind of look at his record and analyze what's going on there. I don't really love any of his wins, but a couple notable ones. He's beat Michael Chiesa, Joaquin Buckley, and Anthony Hernandez. I don't just not the biggest Kevin Holland guy, so whatever. Moving on to Michal, he pretty much beats up on lower competition. I noticed he's fought the same kind of guys that Bo Nakal fights and beats in like the first round via wrestling, so nothing really impressive. For me, his fight's gonna end in any sort of way, so my picks here, I'm guessing Holland wins. I think this fight's a setup for him to keep his ranking, keep a win, keep it moving because he lost recently to Venom Page. Personally, I'm staying away due to the odds. Just don't love Holland at almost minus 300, so it's just not for me, and I don't know how this one will end. So now we are moving on to fight number 11, which is our co-main event, a 5-round fight. Did look at that, so that's something to keep in mind for this one. We have Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. Strickland is minus 245 in the money line. Paulo Costa is plus 200. So Sean Strickland, he's been around for a while. Recently, for those of you who don't know, recently he won the belt against Izzy in September, early September last year. Right now, he's kind of hitting the peak of his career. Ended up losing to Dricus Duplessis. I think that was like January or February. So he's coming off a title fight, two title fights. Um, and just looking at his resume, besides Izzy win, I'm not really impressed by a lot of his wins. Although I'll give him major props for the Izzy win. That was a crazy fight. Just walking him down and shit talking him, whatever. I'm just not really overly impressed by his resume. I'm going into Paulo Costa. He also he is 1-3 in his last four fights, so that's not great. He just came back after a 2-year hiatus and looked decent against Robert Whitaker, who is a beast. Um, I saw a Twitter meme where he was openly admitting to using PEDs on X, and no one doing anything about it. So I don't know. This Paulo Costa guy, he fought Izzy and then said he was drunk, drinking wine. He's kind of a nutcase, but my picks here, I'm picking Costa. I think this is my major upset pick of the night. I just think Costa gets it done. I'm anti Strickland. I think he's kind of a fraud. No offense. Um, Strickland's got a pretty tough chin though, so I doubt he finishes him early. I'm not ruling it out. I just think Costa here. This is a setup for him to get back in the rankings. Strickland, I don't think the UFC loves him. Not that that has anything to do with anything, but I think Costa wins this fight. That's my big upset pick here at plus 200. And actually, was looking at my book personally. All the odds on this are via ESPN. On my book personally, it's plus 225. So Costa, we ride it down. Now our last fight, the main event in the lightweight division, we have Islam Makhachev, who is minus 600, and I was seeing minus 900 today. This is crazy odds for a main event, facing Dustin Poirier, who is plus 400. So a little background around these guys, if you don't know much about them. Islam is a crazy wrestler. Basically comes from the Khabib tree of just being insane at wrestling. He only has one loss in his career, which was 9 years ago in 2015. He's going to wrestle you, and he's probably going to submit you. Could knock you out, could win by decision, but his submissions go crazy. So I actually started listening to the Good Guy, Bad Guy podcast, which is Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen, which if you don't listen to that and you like UFC, I'd recommend it. It's only like 30 to 45 minutes every twice a week. It's funny to hear Chael Sonnen just yell in his house. So recommend that one from the Dubcast here. He was actually on their podcast, and he was kind of sneakily saying that he's looking for a knockout here. So if you like Islam and you want some decent odds, him by knockout's probably not crazy low, like the minus 600 money line he has, which is like, yeah. So Poirier. So this is a quick turnaround for him. He fought Benoit Saint-Denis at UFC 299, another crazy fight. That was on March 9th of this year. He was trying to throw mad guillotines. So that could be something to keep an eye on, is if you can try and pull this guillotine off somehow against Islam, which I doubt happens, but there's always a chance. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, Poirier has a pretty storied career. He hasn't lost by decision since 2013, so 11 years he hasn't lost by decision. So my picks for this, I think it's obviously going to end early. I don't know how Islam's going to do it, but I don't know. I think Poirier deserves better than the plus 400 odds he's been given in this fight, but I just don't see him winning, unfortunately. If you're looking for better odds on Islam, as I mentioned before, taken by knockout or submission. But I do like the over in this fight. On my book, over 2.5 rounds is plus 125. I think Poirier can survive for a decent amount of time. He's got a pretty tough chin. I don't know. Poirier sticking there. We can make it to round 3, and you can win the Dubcast viewers money. Okay, so with that being said, let's get into my official betting card for UFC 302. So these will be the ones that I record on my record, because these are the ones I'm fully confident in. So as mentioned before, I have 2 parlays, and then I have 3 straight bets for you guys. So parlay 1, we have Eileen Perez moneyline and Jailton Almeida moneyline. Almeida is minus 290 and Perez is minus 195. I put these together today on my book. Is like probably minus 105. So basically even odds there for picking those 2 money line. So pretty simple bet there. Moving on to parlay number 2, we have Perez and Edwards to go the distance, and we have Brown and Zaleski dos Santos to go the distance. So if we put those two together, you'll probably see a plus sign in the odds. UFC, you gotta put things together to get good odds. So we'll see how that goes. I mentioned before I like both of those fights to go the distance, and then for our straight bets, we have we have two underdog picks, and then the round over. So Phil Rowe money line plus 140, decent snipe there. Spoke to my UFC source, who also is in betting, so he likes Phil Rowe too. He also likes Paulo Costa money line plus 200. So decent odds there, decent underdogs. See what we got here with those two, and then as I just mentioned for the main event, Poirier and Makhachev over 2.5 rounds is plus 125. Poirier just needs to survive 10 and a half minutes. So we'll see, guys. Thank you so much for watching, as usual. Let me know if you guys are actually taking these picks. Hopefully I can improve this 1-3 record for you guys. Hopefully we go 5-0. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. Just introduced be a part of the Dubcast Google form. It's in the link tree. Found on all my social medias and YouTube, and I think it's on Spotify, but it might not be. I'm looking forward to bringing you guys on this Dubcast. Yeah, so let's see how this UFC fight goes, or this UFC fight night goes, and yeah, have a good one.